And I'll record it. There you go. Right. Okay. So we've learned in the past, um, how many years ago this was? A while ago. We were still in Linda's house. It was
Ah,
probably 2019. We did
mm,
then the Rambam's origins, we call them the origins of the oral law. We explained, if you remember, we explained then how the evolution of how Torah Shabbal Peh worked. Anybody remember anything about that?
We did a lot of
yeah,
discussions in Linda's.
yes, we
We
did.
explained how Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai and how he transmitted the Torah, what Hashem told him, once to Aaron and once to his sons and then to the elders. And then there was also the Torah Shabbal Peh that was given the 13 methods of Torah interpretation and so on. Don't worry, if you don't remember, then we can do it again next year. It's a very important text to learn from the Rambam. Anyway, the point is, we learned over there that there's a pasuk in Chumash, there's a verse in the Chumash that says that Vasisem mishmeret lemishmarti. You shall make a guardrail for my guardrail, or a protection for my protection. In other words, Hashem is giving a command to us that when you see fit, this is the Sanhedrin, the Besdin, when you see it necessary to make a guardrail for my guardrail, then you should go ahead and do it. And then the verse says, and that's the obligation on the courts, on the leadership. And then there's an obligation on us, a biblical obligation, we have to listen to what they tell us. So, for example, the classic example that I always give, the Torah forbids us to pick a fruit from a tree on Shabbos, right?
Mm.
That's a prohibition. Midrabanon, the rabbis came and added on a fence around that because it's very tempting to pick a fruit from a tree on Shabbos. So the rabbis made a fence. Remember the fence? The fence was you're not allowed to smell a fruit from a tree that's on a tree on Shabbos. I mean, you can't go up to an orchard, and you can't go up to smell the orange or whatever it is, because once you smell it and it smells nice, you may be tempted to pick it. So midaraisa, there's the biblical permission of picking a fruit from a tree on Shabbos, and then there's the rabbinic permission of smelling the fruit from the tree on Shabbos. Right? Now, they didn't do that same prohibition, that same fence regarding smelling a flower. Because when you smell a pleasant flower, you're not going to be tempted to pick it and eat it. So there's no need for that prohibition. So there's no need for that fence. Right? So what we refer to sometimes you hear as a rabbinic law, it's not that they sat there some 2,000 years ago thinking, how can we make life difficult for people in 2025? That's not what it was. Every rabbinic law enactment is to protect us, it's a fence to protect us from the far greater transgression. And therefore, every rabbinic law has a reason behind it. Only Hashem can give us mitzvahs without rhyme or reason. Hashem can tell us, don't eat milk and meat, and I'm not going to tell you why. And that's the way it is. Hashem can do that. Right? We have a whole, as we discussed many times, we have a whole category of laws, of mitzvahs called chukim. Chukim are the mitzvahs which have no reason. God, Hashem didn't give it to us with a reason. Right? Like separating wool and linen, and all these type of kashrus, tumah, tar, all these things. But the midarabanon, they can only make a rule if they have to have a good reason for it. And when they came up with it, it went through a rigorous debate amongst all the sages. It's all recorded in the Gemara, and some agreed, some disagreed, and then it was either accepted or not accepted. What we know are the ones that were accepted. We'll soon see an example of one that wasn't accepted. But that is the interaction between biblical law and rabbinic law. Okay. Now, biblical law tells us about various laws of kashrus, right? Like separating milk and meat, like which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher, right? And from that, we have all the laws of kashrus, the way we eat, right? And so on. Then there were some rabbinic laws, fences, to protect us from transgressing certain things.
So it was chicken categorized as meat, a rabbinic law.
That's rabbinic, correct. That's correct. Now, yeah, biblically, the prohibition was meat and milk, not fowl and milk. But then came a time where people no longer differentiated between birds, between fowl and beef. So they forbade that. And that became commonly accepted. The Gemara says originally, Rabbi Yossi HaGlili didn't accept it. So you can travel to his village in the Galil, and you can still get a restaurant with chicken Kiev. But once, but once he passed away, it was already then accepted by everyone. And from then on, today to the point that we didn't even know the difference today. Chicken is
It's
milk and meat and
fleishik.
milk is forbidden. There are certain halachic differences because one is biblical, one is rabbinic. Like anything, meat and milk, which is biblically prohibited, is forbidden to have any benefit from it. You're not allowed to cook it, you're not allowed to sell it, and you're not allowed to eat it. The rabbinic prohibition of fowl and milk is only the prohibition of eating it, because that's why they did it, because people were losing the differentiation. But you can sell it, you can cook it. You can't have a job a Jew can't have a job making cheeseburgers in McDonald's, because you're not allowed to cook cheese and milk and meat, even if it's not kosher. But you could have a job making chicken patties. You're allowed to cook cheese and chicken. The prohibition is only about eating it, because the whole reason, again, the reason they made that prohibition is to protect us from eating it. So every rabbinic law has to have its reason. Okay? So there were three types of foods that our sages forbade us to consume if they were prepared by a non-Jew. Okay? They are bread products prepared by a goy, known as pas akum. Pas is bread. Pas akum means bread of a non-Jew, or pas palter is bread from a baker. And we're not going to go into the details today, but there's a big difference in halacha as well between the two, if it is baked by the non-Jew personally at home or baked by a baker. So they made three types of foods that are prepared by a non-Jew. They forbade us. One of them is pas, bread. One of them is bishul akum, that's food cooked by a goy. And the third one they made was oil prepared by a goy. Now, I told you earlier that not everything passed. That third one about oil never passed. So that's what we don't know about it today. There wasn't a suggestion of oil as well, oil that was prepared by a goy, but that never, it didn't pass the. Here in England, if you want to pass a law, it has to go through to the House of Lords, and then it has to the Parliament, House of Commons, then it has to go to the House of Lords, and then they send it back to the House of right. This whole system. The same thing happened back in the day when if they felt the need to make certain institutions, it had to go through a rigorous test with all the sages, and oil didn't go through. We once had a class a number of years ago about Purim. Mordechai and Esther, the original plan was that they wanted Purim to be a Yom Tov like Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Wanted a full Yom Tov, because Purim was the only time that the entire Jewish nation were in danger of being annihilated. There was enemies beforehand. They destroyed. There was the Babylonians, the Romans, the Greeks, but no one was looking to destroy the entire Jewish nation. The Greeks wanted to assimilate us. The Babylonians took us as slaves. Haman wanted to destroy the entire Jewish people. Everyone, no exception. So it was the first time in 1,000 years of the Jewish nation that such a thing happened. So Mordechai and Esther wanted this to become a Yom Tov like Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. But the Megillah tells us it was only established a year later. Why? Because for a year they were trying to work on this, but it wasn't accepted by the majority of the people and by the sages.
Can I ask a question? Who or when was it decreed that Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot were the three reglaim when they went up to?
It's in the Chumash at Sinai.
Yeah, so that's Chumash, not rabbinic.
That's Chumash. That's biblical. God said that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So how can they just add Purim onto it?
So I was just saying. So the Mordechai and Esther wanted to add Purim. It should have the severity, the gravity of Pesach Shavuos, because it was such a tremendous miracle. In fact, because Pharaoh wasn't looking to kill the Jews, even he was enslaving them. This was the first time and the only time that there was someone who came and wanted to annihilate the entire people. That would be the end of the nation. We'd be gone from history. So that never happened before. So for that, Mordechai and Esther felt that it shouldn't just be a commemoration day. This should be on the same level, at least, of Pesach.
So you said about bread. So Warburton's bread has a kosher label on it.
Yeah. Oh, so we're gonna get to the practicalities. Yeah, we just
Okay.
started. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're gonna get to that. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, my point is, so therefore oil was an attempt, but oil didn't work. Okay, so Purim, sorry, back to Purim. So they couldn't turn it into a Yom Tov like the other Yom Tovim for various reasons, which we discussed 4 years ago in the share, if anybody remembers. Otherwise, we'll do it again next Purim. The point is, it did remain as a Yom Tov, but not where you're not allowed to dry, you're not allowed to light fire and all that like they originally intended it. They wanted it to be a rabbinic Pesach, right? But it is a Yom Tov, and that's why Purim is celebrated, should be celebrated. And which we have to. It's not a kids' game. Purim is a very, very serious day, in the sense that it is a tremendous miracle where the entire nation was saved. So okay, so this institution of oil was not accepted by the majority of Klal Yisrael at the time that it was enacted, and therefore the sages subsequently removed it completely. However, the rule about bread was also not accepted by the majority of Klal Yisrael. Why? Because bread is a basic staple of survival, and there were times when the only place to acquire bread was bread baked it was difficult to obtain bread baked by a Jew. So therefore, the sages waived the restriction of bread baked by a non-Jew. Obviously, we're talking about kosher bread. This isn't a kashrus issue. Okay, we're talking here about bread that's actually kosher. Today, there's all sorts of ingredients in the bread, so you can't take for granted that you go into a bakery and buy the bread, it's kosher, because there's all sorts of ingredients. But when this was done, it was bread. The Goyim made bread the same way the Jewish people made bread, and therefore they made a leniency that it doesn't apply in a place where you can't get Pas Yisrael Jewish bread, where it's not available. Then they said you can rely on the non-Jewish bread. But if you live in a place where you could get Jewish bread, then there's no reason not to, and therefore that prohibition applies. So, to jump the gun, but what Michelle just said, Wolverton's, or there's another company, so those breads are kosher. They have under the Sephardi, but they're not Pas Yisrael. Which means that if you're able to get Jewish bread, Pas Yisrael, Jewish baked bread, then you should. If you're not able to, then you can rely on that.
Hello?
You understand?
Yes. Yeah.
So the restriction on the bread isn't as severe. So you have oil, which didn't happen at all. The next level is we have bread.
Yes.
It has its leniencies. And then the most severe level is bishul, is cooking. And that remains in full force to this very day. So we're going to learn about these. We're going to learn about bread, and then we're going to do about the cooking and some practical examples. And then we'll see how exactly and when exactly does it apply. Let me get this up here on the screen. I forgot to put up the source sheet. Here we go. Right. Okay. Hey, where have you guys gone? No. One second. Let me put it back on. Here we go. Then, here we go. Okay, now I can see you as well. Okay, so they decreed 3 things: bread, cooked products, and oil. Oil never worked. Bread, there are the leniencies. Bishul levashel. Bishul means to cook. Cooked products are strict, as we'll soon see. We get to that in part 2. Okay. Now, we have an expression in the Gemara and the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 103b. Great is food, as it has the power to draw people closer. People are generally relaxed at a meal setting and tend to share their thoughts and feelings with others at the table. And therefore, recognizing the power of a meal, the sages put certain safeguards in place to ensure that this power of a meal is controlled, so to speak, is harnessed. Now, the general reason for these two, of bread products and cooked products, is to prevent feelings of indebtedness and closeness between a Jew and a Gentile, which could eventually lead to intermarriage, God forbid. A second reason is that we're concerned that the Gentile may have added non-kosher ingredients to the food. So I said earlier that it's not the issue of non-kosher, it's not an issue of non-kosher. That means that today's bread, they're obviously kosher. The problem with the bread is that it wasn't baked by a Jew. So there's two reasons for these enactments of bread products and cooked products. One is intermarriage, and one is ingredients. Now, let's talk now about Pas Yisrael, about bread products. When they made this rule, so when you make a rule, you have the ability to be able to design it the way you see fit. In other words, it has to be specific for the needs that, every rule they're going to make has to have a reason to justify it. Parameters. So let's first define what is pas, what is bread. So the two reasons we said is intermarriage and kashrus. Now let's first define what is bread. So for starters is, the parameter number one of bread is, it's defined as a product made from any of the 5 grains, which are wheat, oats, spelt, rye, and barley, which when ground into flour are made into a dough and then baked. That is what makes bread, as opposed to if they're in a different format. It has to be, number one, from these 5 grains, and it has to be made into bread or pastry or cake or cookies. All of this falls into this category, even though we use the word pas, which means bread, but it means anything, a baked product, okay? As opposed to rice and millet, for example, that you can make a dough out of. I don't know what millet is. Anybody know what that is?
It's what you give to birds, isn't it?
I have no idea. But it's a type of grain, but it's not from the 5 grains. So therefore, it doesn't fall under this category. Because, probably for the reason that Dan just said, it's not something that humans usually eat. So therefore, they didn't make their rule to cover that. And rice bread also not. So again, their rule has to be, if the reason of their rule is the 2 above mentioned reasons, then, or one of them, then they made the rule. So it only applies to these 5. Then there are certain foods, such as pasta, that are also, they're made from the 5 grains, but are cooked and not baked. So they're not considered pas. And therefore they don't have a problem of pas of a goy, bread of a goy. Rather, there's a different problem of bishul, of cooking, which we'll get to later. So even though pasta is made from wheat, but it's not baked. Now, classifying a food as belonging to one of the either category will bring with it a stringency and a leniency. For example, if a food is classified as pas, as a baked good, so it has the leniency of being permitted in a situation where you can't get pas Yisroel. So if you live in a place where there's no Jewish bread, then you can rely on the leniency and buy, what was it called? Kingsmill. Or what was the other one? Wolverton's. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Because if you live in a place where they don't sell kosher Jewish bread, not kosher bread, Jewish bread, then you have that leniency. Okay. But if it's not classified as bread, then it's even a greater leniency because it's not bread. So you can have like rice bread and stuff like that. That's why rice cakes are generally kosher. But rice cakes have a different problem. We're not going to go into all the kashrus, but rice cakes is possibly a different problem. That's why we should avoid having rice cakes without a hechsher, because in the factories where they make the rice cakes, on the conveyor belt line, they also make different types of rice cakes, which have in it sometimes milky and sometimes even not kosher. So that's the issue with the rice cake. But in any case, there are sometimes some scenarios where a food item will have both categories, like a potato boreka. It has in it cooked food, potatoes, and it's a baked good as well, right? It's 2 types of foods wrapped together. The dough is subject to the laws of pas, of a goy, while the potato filling is subject to the laws of Bishul of a goy. So if you have if you don't have a problem with the bread, you might have a problem with the potatoes. So that's something that has to be looked into. Now, let's move on. So first criteria is it has to be the 5 grains. Second criteria is it has to be the way it's made is a thick batter. That's why pretzels and crackers are included in this because it's a thick batter. One second. Right. So the Shulchan Aruch defines pas as any baked item made using a thick batter that has an appearance of bread. Others add on and say that any item which one would have to make hamaitzi, if you were to establish a meal on it, falls under the category of bread. What does that mean? A separate law. Nothing to do with this. If you're going to have pizza, or you can have cake. Yeah, you have a cake, a yeast cake. So yeast cake was made into a dough, and it's a yeast cake, so it's a brachas mezainis. But if you can eat a lot of cake, in other words, as we say, you can make a meal out of it, that'll become your lunch, then you have to make hamaitzi on it. You have to wash and treat it as bread. So therefore they say any type of dough, any item, that if you were to eat a lot of it, you would be obligated to wash, then it falls under the category of pas, and it needs to be Jewish bread. Right? And therefore the common consensus is that pretzels and crackers have the din of pas, and therefore they need to be pas Yisroel, they need to be Jewish bread, so to speak. There's another thing out there, which I haven't seen much in this country. In America, it's big. It's called par-baked. You ever heard of par-baked?
No.
Now, here's an interesting thing. Par-baked means partially baked.
Yeah.
Oh,
They do
yes,
have
and then you put it in
they
the
do have
oven.
it in England.
Yes.
Oh, you do have it.
Yeah, you can buy it and then you have to put it in the oven, apparently.
Oh, and then you finish it off. So now, does the partial bake already turn it into pas of a goy? Or you finishing it at home, finish the baking process, then that turns it into pas Yisroel. What do you think?
Interesting.
This par-baked was initially underbaked with the intent of completing the baking process at home.
In other words, you couldn't eat it if you don't finish it off at home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right. And therefore, once you bake it, that's when it's considered becomes bread, and therefore it's kosher, it's fine. It's pas Yisroel, because it's considered as if you made it. It is only partially baked by the goy, so it's not edible yet. And if it's not edible yet, it's not bread. Who turned it into bread? You did. So then it's fine.
Mhm.
All right? What happens in that case if I take non-pas Yisroel bread and I'll toast it? Will that make it okay for me? The answer is no, because it's already edible before I got it. It is already fully bread. It is already baked by the non-Jew. So it's full bread, so it's already considered pas akum, and therefore I'm not allowed to have it. The fact that I'm making it to toast doesn't change it anymore. It just bakes it more, but it's not. I'm not taking it out of a partial baked scenario into a fully baked scenario, and therefore toast doesn't work.
So with the par baked, are you supposed to give a portion? You know how you're supposed to take a portion of bread?
For challah, very
Yeah.
good question. When everyone's familiar with the mitzvah of challah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So what's the answer to Michelle's question? It's a good question. The answer is no, you don't have to, because you didn't make the dough. The one who makes the dough is obligated to take off challah.
So
Here, the one who made the dough was a goy. The
Yeah.
goy doesn't have the obligation to take off challah. So you don't have a problem.
Oh, right.
Good question, though. Now there's something else, a more modern thing, which is interesting, the light bulb loophole. What's the light bulb loophole? So, about 100 years ago, when began the mass production of kosher foods started in America. I don't think you had yet in England mass production of it. You did have small, but in America it started. So there's these big companies, like take for example here in England, Jacob's cream crackers. Okay, those need to be pas Yisroel. So how are you going to do that? What makes bread pas Yisroel? That a Jew baked it, right? So what does it mean? That you have to have a Jew working in every Jacob's cream cracker factory?
Hmm.
Is that what it means? How do you turn the bread, which is by the company isn't owned by Jews? It doesn't have to be owned by Jews. So what turns it into pas Yisrael? If a Jew bakes it. So you have to have Jewish bakers in all of these companies. So someone came up with an interesting solution. So 1 second. So what is done before we come to this interesting solution? So what is done? The Jew has to either light the fire, or in many of these companies, the fire is lit in January and it stays lit until December 24th. And they just go throughout the year. So the Jew has to just come and throw in a piece of wood, a match, even contribute to the fire. Then it's considered pas Yisrael. Then it's considered baked by a Jew. There's a story that in the 1930s, when the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin lived in Paris, so no one knew. The Rebbe would go at night at 2 a.m. He would go to the baker, where the Jews would buy their bread, their baguettes, and they would go in and throw a piece of wood into the fire, and then go back home at 2 a.m. before when they were just about starting to bake for the next day's run. So that way, the Jews in Paris would have pas Yisrael bread, because there was no Jewish bakeries. So the Rebbe did that quietly. No one knew about it. The Rebbetzin told the story many years later. So that's all that's necessary to turn it into pas Yisrael. You need to have a Jew who lights the fire or contributes to the fire. So in the 1930s, someone came up with an interesting idea that if they install a light bulb into the oven, light bulb makes heat, so then it could perhaps be considered also as contributing to the heat of the oven, like lighting a fire or throwing in a match. Even right, because the law is that even if a Jew threw in a piece of wood into the fire, the bread is considered pas Yisrael. So therefore, people started relying on this loophole of a heter of a light bulb inside the company's oven. A Jew turns on the bulb, which adds a bit of heat to the oven, and then the bulb remains lit the whole time. So that would allow everything that's baked inside the oven to be considered pas Yisrael. So it's an interesting loophole. Some kashrus authorities use it, but most no longer do that, because especially today's light bulbs not necessarily generate a lot of heat, and it's not really significant. So most today it's not commonly used at all. But it's just an interesting how the Jewish mind works, how we try to find a way to deal with the problem, and this is an interesting solution.
So,
yeah.
So you know what, for Pesach, what's the expectation there? Because some non-Jewish places make kosher Pesach products. So how do you get around that?
If they're kosher Pesach, then they're going to have a Jewish shomer there.
So he's there all the time?
If it's for kosher Pesach, yeah. Like, give me an example.
Like the jams, tiptree jam.
So the jams, it's not a question of baking. Give me an we're talking here about baking. Give me an example of baking. The only baking you have on Pesach is matzah.
But some of these things are not kosher during the year, but for you people, you get them kosher Pesach. Like Coca-Cola, you get it kosher Pesach.
So that means that there'll be a stricter observance, a stricter shomer, a stricter hechsher, So they'll be there. So if it's a situation of baking, which again, Pesach there isn't. Your question is a good question. Ask it when we come to the cooking, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, don't be sorry. Right, so then, as we'll soon see, we can actually speak about that, not in the context of Pesach, but certain foods need to have, by nature, have to have a shomer there, in which case they'll already make sure that it's Bishul Yisroel. Matzah is the only baked good we have on Pesach that we buy that needs to be protected for pas Yisroel, and that's matzah is a Jewish-owned enterprise, and it's always pas Yisroel. Ready-made cakes made from potato starch isn't Bishul. Isn't pas, it's not bread. So technically it doesn't, you don't have that problem. Okay. Fine. Now, that is more or less about the baking side of things. Okay, so just to recap, the sages instituted that pas, which can mean bread, biscuits, cookies, anything of baked nature that's made from the 5 grains, and it has to have been used as a thick batter, as opposed to sometimes you make a cake and it's from a very drippy batter, right? If you're baking, right? That's why I used the example earlier of a yeast cake. Yeast cake is a dough, as opposed to a type of cake which is not a dough, but rather it's poured into a tin.
Yeah.
That doesn't fall under the category of pas Yisroel. You understand? So anything that is made of the baked and doughy, a thick batter of the 5 grains, falls under this prohibition of pas akum, pas bread of a non-Jew. And the sages said this is prohibited, but they made certain exceptions because the importance of bread as a basic staple of humanity. Therefore, they said if you live in a place where there is no bread, then you can, provided it's kosher, you can rely on non-Jewish bread, and that is what SKA does. They purposely didn't make it pas Yisrael because it was a request from the kosher bakers not to, because then they'll be out of business because it's half the price, which I disagree with, because why should they be charging so much for bread? But it is what it is. So it means if you're living in a city where it's easily able to purchase Jewish-owned bread, then there's no excuse to use King's milk. But if you went to the deli and they ran out of bread, I don't know, do they sell bread here in the deli?
Sometimes.
All right, there you go. So if they didn't have the bread, then you have no problem. You can go to Tesco and buy the Wolvertons or the King's
So
milk.
that's a good point you just said. The cost is so incredible, the difference.
Yeah, okay.
So where there is
Okay,
kosher
it's an
bread,
extra, whatever it costs. It's a 50p or 60p difference. It's not, I'm saying that even that much shouldn't be, but whatever. It is what it is. But the leeway that the Chachamim gave was if you live in a place where there is no available bread, then you can use the non-Jewish bread. Again, provided that you know that it's a kosher ingredients, and that's why the SKA is giving their hechsher on it, because they're checking for the ingredients, but they're not making it pas Yisrael. Or if you're traveling going to Wales on holiday, whatever, then you're certainly not going to get Jewish-owned bread. So then you can you can buy the other bread. Okay. So that's the rule of bread. Okay, so pas Yisrael, pas akum, pas palter. We said before that pas palter means the bread in a bakery. So that's baker's bread. Pas akum of a goy, you can't eat, because if he's baking it in his house, you don't know his ovens and so on. So the permissibility is about pas palter. Palter means a baker. So the bakers make all their bread uniform, and as long as you've established that their ingredients is a kosher ingredients, as it used to be, flour, and it used to be, what's baguettes? The French baguettes is flour and water and some yeast. Today there's all sorts of other ingredients in our breads. That's why it has to have
Salt?
Salt is fine, but sometimes they have other. Sometimes they have milk in it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that's bread. So oil never passed. Bread with restrictions.
Can I just...
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. Oil. Why was it that we were told at Pesach you could have oil as long as it had the H round the top?
The what?
There was a letter H actually imprinted in the bottle on the top, and we were told it started during COVID. And there was a ruling that you could buy the oil.
Which company oil? Which company?
I think it was Tesco's own or Sainsbury's own, as long as it had an H round the top.
Okay, I don't have an answer for that. I can only guess. First, let's establish what's the problem with oil.
This was ordinary, the vegetable oil, I think.
Okay.
Tesco.
First
And
of all, let's
it was saying
establish.
at Pesach you could have it as long as you
Yeah.
could find the H that's sort of slightly raised on the neck of the
All right.
bottle.
Okay, first we have to establish what the problem with oil is. Then we got to establish the London Besdin's criteria, their level of kashrus. I think we discussed this in the past. London Besdin wants to bring as many people in under the rubric of kosher, so therefore their standard of kosher is quite low. So anyone who's slightly concerned about kashrus with certain products, you wouldn't rely on them on London Besdin. For example, oil, especially when it comes to Pesach. The problems with oil today, this is nothing to do with our class, but it's important to know. Why does oil need a hechsher? Because it says on it vegetable oil or sunflower oil, but
Could it, sorry, could it be that the olives might have been picked on Shabbat? So then
olives. We're not talking about olive oil.
Oh, sorry,
Olives is a different thing. I was about to get to olive. I specifically said vegetable oil or sunflower oil.
Sorry, okay, yeah.
Right? Olives is a different story. Vegetable oil, which is all that are the way they're manufactured today, they make oil. They can make oil from many, many things. Anything that you can squeeze hard, then you can get some oil out of it. Sometimes even out of trees, out of wood. And these oil companies produce oil from all sorts of things, and they ship them in these big tankers. Okay, now it could be oil from non-kosher fish. And they manufacture the oil. It looks, smells, and tastes exactly the same. And if the majority is vegetables, then it's considered vegetable oil. And that's really the problem today with buying vegetable oil without a hechsher, because you cannot be guaranteed which oil is that it's absolutely vegetable oil, and which vegetable and what. The only oil that you don't need a hechsher on today is olive oil, and not any olive oil, only extra virgin olive oil. Because by law, extra virgin olive oil has to be extra virgin olive oil. And nothing else. It has to be exactly as it says in the label. So you can buy from Tesco any extra virgin olive oil. Anything less than that could have additives and other oils to it. Vegetable oil, not could have, it definitely does. And therefore, there's no guarantee. So I'm guessing now that the London Besdin knows that Tesco's oil that has an H on it means A, B, or C. And therefore, during the time of COVID, when it was a time of under duress, they relied on a loophole. But it's not something that we can then go and take and use it every day. I wouldn't use regular vegetable oil anyway, because you don't know what's in that vegetable oil.
If it says suitable for vegans, would it be okay?
Okay. We're digressing, but that's
Sorry.
fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Suitable for vegetarians and vegans means...
It's okay.
Doesn't mean it's okay.
Oh, right. Oh, right.
Vegans, I have to check. When something generally says vegetarian, it does not necessarily mean vegetarian according to halacha, according to Jewish law.
Right.
Because when something says vegetarian, and I once did this in a Thursday night class, and somebody argued with me because he liked going out to eat in vegetarian restaurants, and then he came back to me on the Monday and he said, you're right. Because in halacha, we have certain rules of what is allowed to be mixed in to something, and it's still considered parv, for example, right? We have laws of milk spilled into meat, if it's 60 times as much and so on, right? And I told them a story that I was once at a kashrus conference. Soya, yeah?
Yeah.
So this kashrus company was asked to come and give why does soya need a hechsher? It's made from soya, it's vegetarian. So he explained. They once went to a factory in Japan, they wanted to have a hechsher, and they go to check, and it's all absolutely 100% ingredients soya, no problem. Now the soya needs to be fermented. To ferment the soya, you need to have a fermenting agent, which is a protein. Because it's an agent which causes the whole thing to happen, it's never nullified by 60. If you're familiar with the laws of Batal B'Shishim, nullified by 60, right? It's really with that. Anyone familiar with that?
Yeah.
Right. So, but because it's a fermenting agent, so we have to find out where this is coming from. So they said this comes from a factory in south of Japan. So the Shem has to fly down from Tokyo, goes to South Japan to this factory, and he discovers that this protein, which is used, it's not sold in shops. It's something which is it's one of the ingredients which are used by factories. It doesn't turn up on the list of ingredients on the jar because it's not an ingredient as such. It's a fermenting agent is made from pig stomachs.
Oh.
That's a vegetarian. That is by the Vegetarian Society, and legally that's considered vegetarian. As far as Jewish law is concerned, it's chazer treif. You understand? So when they write vegetarian on it, not necessarily is it vegetarian according to Jewish standards.
Can I just interrupt there, talking about things made from pig stomachs? When Dennis was very ill, and I think you know the answer to this, Avram, he was prescribed a particular drug, and it had something to do with the chazer in it. And I think he asked you, or he asked somebody, or wrote to somebody, and they said if it's the only one available, it's not a problem.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Why? Because you just said why. He was very ill.
Yeah, it's for health.
It's for health.
Yeah.
And if it's just, take for example, capsules.
Yeah.
Capsules are made from gelatin. So if I'm taking vitamins, I'm not allowed to take gelatin capsules because it's vitamins. Vitamins is not going to kill you. It's a nice thing to have. Then go and find an alternative. But if someone needs it because they have angina and they need to take, they have serious heart condition, and that's the only medication available in a capsule, there's no question. Of course you take it.
Before he asked the question, he was I think you remember he was bothered about it, but once
he should be bothered, of course. Yeah, it's not a Jew should have never eat chazer in his life. Should start eating chazer, of course.
Yeah.
So the answer is you're allowed to.
He doesn't take it anymore.
Very good. The answer is if it's life pikuach, and of course you're allowed to. But at the same time, you want to find if there's an alternative, right? I have to take tablets for my blood pressure. So I always today you do it on the app. You make your the repeat prescription with the NHS, right? You're familiar with that? Yeah, right? Yeah. So I always put a note, no capsules. So they always give me tablets.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because they have it in tablets. What I got to take capsules for? One time they gave me capsules. I went back, I showed them, and I said, please. And they checked, yeah, we have. And I said, fine. So now they know there's a standing order. They don't give me capsules. But sometime when I had my infection in my leg then 4 years ago, the only thing they gave me, I asked them nothing else but capsules. It's the only way it comes.
So you had to take them?
I had no choice, yeah. Fine.
I remember.
Because it was antibiotics. It was a big infection. So that was it. I had to take what I had to take. It
wasn't a pretty sight.
Remember, you came to me, yeah. Right? Okay, so that's the answer to your question. So therefore, back to what Estelle was saying, if it says, now, vegan is something else. So I was talking about vegetarian. So this fellow came back to me on Monday, and he did a search on the internet, and he said, you're right. The Vegan Society has certain rules for their kashrus, and this type of protein would not transgress their vegetarian standard, and it would still be considered vegetarian. But it's not considered kosher, according to all standards, because it can't be nullified by 60 because it's a catalyst. It causes the fermentation, right? Anyways, so how do we get onto that? Oh, so about the H, I imagine that they knew that the Tesco oil, vegetable oil with an H, whatever. I don't know. I really can't answer for that. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Now we go on to cooking. Oh, it's late. We go on to cooking now. Cooking is defined in Jewish law as food. Bishul Akum, cooking of a goy, is defined as food cooked by a goy that has the inherent status of being fit to serve at a formal meal. In other words, condition number one is it has to be, the expression in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Gemara is Oila al Shulchan Melachim. It has to be a food that would be appropriate to go up onto the table of kings, what we would call today a banquet, something fancy, what you would serve at your child's wedding, right? Not something you just have on a brunch, right? So for starters, any food which is significant enough to be served at an important event. Number one. So chickpeas, for example. Chickpeas is not something that's served as a dish. Maybe mixed in the vegetables, but it's not served on the main. It's not a fancy dish that you're going to go to a state dinner or to a wedding. They're going to serve you chickpeas. So that's why you can buy Tesco chickpeas, provided you know that the ingredients is only water and salt, and they've cooked it. It's not a problem of Bishul Akum. If you ever bought Tesco chickpeas. Number two, it has to be a type of food that you would have eaten in a meal. A meal means bread, not just eaten on its own. Number three, according to the Rambam, it has to be a type of food that's choshev enough, that's significant enough that you would invite a friend over. Fish. Come, we'll have some fish. Oh, I'll come over. You may be serving fish, having a fish barbecue. What about if I called someone over and say, come, I'm opening up a bag of potato chips. You want to come and join me? Would you go to visit someone just for a bag of potato chips? Right? So potatoes is not in this category. Now, potatoes, some say it is because in the modern day, potatoes might be served in a fancy setting, but generally speaking, it never was. It's peasant food. Next condition: it has to be a food that is inedible raw. The only way you can eat it is if it's cooked. So up until 60 years ago, carrots was in this category, and now it is no longer in the category because today everyone eats carrots raw.
Potatoes?
No one eats potatoes raw.
No.
You wouldn't
But carrots
eat potatoes
used to never
raw.
be eaten raw. Today they're all mostly eaten raw.
Yeah, both.
And that's what I give you the example of crisps. Once I will get to crisps in a minute. So these are the four categories where this whole prohibition applies. If it doesn't fit into any of these four categories, you don't have a problem with Bishul Akum if a guy cooks it for you. Practical terms, it means is, let's say I have someone working in my house. In South Africa, it's more common than here. Here, you may have a cleaner. She cleans up. She doesn't. I don't know. Does she cook for you? I don't know. But
No.
if she, whatever, if she does, then you might have a problem depending what it is that she's cooking for you. The solution around the problem is that you light the fire, right? But the issue is that if it's cooked by a goy, so if it fits into one of these four categories, it has to be a significant type of food. It has to be eaten with a meal, with bread. It has to be a type of meal you invite a friend, excuse me. And it's inevitable raw, so meat and fish and all these type of things. This is the speed bumps that the Chazal, that the sages made to protect us from intermarriage. They couldn't prohibit us. Jewish people went into exile, and now we're living amongst the nations of the world. They can't prohibit us from associating and doing anything with non-Jews. It's not possible, not practical. So they made speed bumps. So that if you're going to socialize, but you can't have a meal that they cooked for you if it's one of these four categories. Anything less than that is really not going to be such an important or significant meal. And therefore, it has to have these four in order to fall into the category of Bishul Akum. Now, what about crisps? So crisps, I just told you. It's crisp doesn't fit into the category of inviting a friend, even though it's inedible raw. Right? It's not an important food, so therefore crisps does not need to be. So what are the kosher crisps today? Kettle crisps. They're kosher under the London Bezdin, but they're not Bishul Yisroel because they don't need to be Bishul Yisroel. So London Bezdin checks the ingredients and so on, but they don't turn on the fires to cook the potato chips because they don't have to. Cold breakfast cereals. Ever wonder how cold breakfast cereals are made? What could be the problem with breakfast cereal?
Cereal. Well, cereal.
So there's a problem. It could be with cornflakes and Rice Krispies, and the different problem it could be with Shreddies.
Could have milk in it.
No. We're talking about only specifically these two. We're here to again. They were talking about cooking or baking.
Oh, nothing.
The problem could be is that they're cooked. What do you mean? They're corn? Nothing. Cooked corn.
Oh, we don't do anything with them apart from put them in a
No, the
bowl.
way they're processed, the way they're made.
Wow.
The way they're
Right.
made is that they involved cooking.
Mhm.
Right? Now, cereals don't need to be Bishul Yisroel. Today, practically all breakfast cereals are cooked and then either steamed or puffed. And many hold that foods that are prepared using this method don't need to be Bishul Yisroel. In fact, they say that if it's steamed, it's not the real cooking even. And therefore it's not considered cooking by a goy. And that's where most of our canned vegetables that you buy are steamed. They're not cooked. If they're steamed, first of all, if they're cooked, you have a question, where were they cooked? In Del Monte's, you have Del Monte in this country?
Yes.
Yeah, the cooked vegetables. Yeah. So where are they cooking it? Are they cooking in the same pots and pans that they... So it used to be cooked. The new technology of the last 30 years is steaming. But it used to be cooked. And when it was cooked, they didn't kosher their big vats. And they cooked... Yesterday, they cooked meatballs. And today, they're cooking vegetables. They may have sterilized it, but they didn't kosher it. So there used to be a problem. But today, it's probably not... Probably. We don't know because there's no hechsher on it, so no one's checking. But generally speaking, today, they steam. And steaming is not considered cooking, so there's no question, there's no problem of Bishul Akum. The same thing is done with the grain types of cereals. They're not baked. They're steamed, and then they're put together. After they're steamed, then they're put in the oven to turn them into shreddies or Weetabix, etc. And therefore, there's no problem of pas either with them. Okay? The next item on the list of practical things of cooking, of cooked products, would be canned tuna as opposed to canned salmon. Two very different things. What's the problem? It's a type of fish that could be served at a banquet, at an important event, right? Tuna. And therefore, tuna falls under the problem of bishul. The tuna that you buy in canned tuna is already cooked. Obviously, you can eat it. It's cooked tuna. So from a practical point of view, it shouldn't be an issue of bishul akum, because if there is a shomer present, in other words, if it's cans of tuna with a hechsher on it, then the shomer will already see to it that it's cooked Bishul Yisroel. That's not a problem. So what then could be a problem with canned tuna? If you're buying tuna that doesn't have a hechsher on it. Now again, I don't want to badmouth the London Besdin, but the London Besdin standard isn't a very high standard. So they allow canned tuna. Because there's two issues now on hechsher tuna. First of all, okay, there's the issue of bishul, of cooking. We'll get to that in a minute. Because it's obviously cooked by a goy. The second issue is a more realistic issue, and that is it even tuna in the can? People don't know this. The process of making tuna is, in short, they fish the tuna, they come from somewhere, the Philippines and these countries in the Far East. And these big, massive ships go out for a week at a time with massive long nets. And they bring in millions of fish. And inside this massive tanker, there's a factory. And there's these Filipino women sitting there inside there, and the conveyor belt is sending out fish to them, and they're cutting open the fish, skinning them, and putting them into the other side, and then it goes into a machine, it cooks it, and cans it all on the ship. And after a week of there, they come out and they already canned, and they put them into boxes and they ship them off. It never saw the light of day. In these big nets, the nets are mainly for the tuna, but other fish get caught there as well. The Filipino ladies who are sitting there getting minimum wage, they don't separate what's kosher and what's not kosher. It makes no difference to them. Their job is to cut the fish and it happen and make it happen. And therefore, once the fish is cooked and put into a tuna can, you and I will never be able to differentiate and know that there's another type of fish in here either, as well, because they all look exactly the same. So we can't really be guaranteed that in the regular canned tuna that you buy in Tesco that there's no non-kosher fish in there. Why does the London Besdin say it's okay? Because they're going by the majority. Again, because otherwise some people will say, forget it, I'm not keeping kosher anyway. So therefore they have a very low standard. But for people who are concerned about kashrus a little bit, then I wouldn't recommend touching it. Now, you'll say to me, 1 second. I remember, you might be being a bit super firm over here. So I'll tell you a very simple thing. You all remember about 25, 30 years ago. I imagine around that time. I think it was in the 90s. It happened in America. I'm sure it happened over here as well. There's suddenly a new thing was written on canned tuna. Dolphin free. Do you remember suddenly this came into it? Dolphin-free tuna? Anyone familiar with that? Good morning, Dennis. Dolphin-free tuna. What do you mean? What happened? Because there were, there's always a different campaign.
Mine's about to die.
Sorry?
Sorry, I was just sorry. I was talking to Dennis. Sorry.
There's always different campaigns in the world. Save the planet, save the whales. It became save the dolphins. The dolphins were becoming an endangered species. So tuna companies started advertising that we now make sure that our tuna is dolphin-free. Because until now, we weren't careful. And there was even dolphins inside our tuna cans. And now they make sure that they're dolphin-free. So I'm not being super frum with you. I'm telling you the reality. The reality is that when they fish tuna in the Philippines, no one is taking care to make sure that there's no other fish except dolphins. Dolphins, you can, don't worry, you're not going to have dolphins in your tuna. But no one is making sure that there's no other fish because there's no interest, there's no need for these women sitting there in the boat to separate it. That's why when you buy kosher tuna, there's a shomer who goes out there for a week in the fashtukene boat, and he has to sit there and watch and make sure. So he turns on the fire as well for the cooking, and therefore it's kosher. So it's not just kosher from a Bishul Akum point of view, it's kosher from a fish point of view. So that's the issues with tin salmon. So tin salmon should be, now others say that that for salmon the cooking is okay. Again, provided it's only salmon. So there are some loopholes. Fine. Salmon on tuna. That's all tuna. Salmon, on the other hand, is a different story. We have a tradition, and as we know, that salmon has a unique color to it. So you can recognize that it's salmon. So when you open up a tin of salmon and there's something else in there, you'll see it straight away because it's a different color. So we don't have a problem. Therefore, it's much easier to buy tin salmon than it is to buy tin tuna, because the kashrus of the salmon is easier, is better. Okay, other canned foods, they're all, I said earlier, they're all steamed, so you don't have a problem. Unless, again, provided the ingredients are fine. Spices don't need to be Bishul Yisroel, because Bishul cooking of a Jew doesn't apply to ingredients whose primary function is to enhance other foods. So spices is not going to cause intermarriage, so it's not a problem. Coffee and tea is now, why coffee and tea? Because you're not cooking the coffee. You're cooking the guy is cooking the water. Water doesn't fall under the prohibition of Bishul Akum. So all he's doing is he's putting coffee or tea, he's coloring and flavoring the water. But the water is not an issue. The big issue, however, is when you have non-Jewish staff, whether it's at home or wherever, then you got to make sure that you are the one that's lighting the fire. There's three parts to cooking. There is preparing the food. There's turning on the fire, the oven or the gas, the top, and then there's putting it into the fire. As long as a Jew is doing one of them, then it is considered Bishul Yisroel, and there's no problem, no kashrus issues. The easiest one is to light the fire, which is what's done in the factories. But if you're in a home situation and you have a non-Jewish cook there, then you have to make sure that you do one of those four stages, and then the food is kosher. The strictness of Bishul, this last one, is so strict that the Shulchan Aruch rules that if it was done, if the Jew didn't do it, then you have to kosherize, you have to kasher all the vessels in the kitchen. That's how strict it is. That my daily took my glatt kosher meat and cooked a glatt kosher cholent for me. Thank you very much. But you didn't ask me, and I didn't turn on the fire. I didn't prepare the cholent, and I didn't put it into the slow cooker. Then I got a serious problem now. I have to tell her politely, never do it again. Without asking me. Okay, so those are the issues with bread and cooking. So just
and going back to Pesach, so coffee and tea, why does that have to be Pesach?
Okay, then? Pesach is a different story. Pesach, because it's extra stringency, because of Pesach of Chametz is even the minutest, smallest amount, even a particle. So therefore, Pesach, everybody goes over the top. We want to make sure that it's been inspected from the beginning to the end. And therefore, many people, again, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I have to say the truth, right? We're going to tell the truth. Vegetarian restaurants are not kosher. Not because the ingredients are not kosher, but because they're being cooked by a non-Jew. And some of the vegetables may not be vegetables that go onto tables onto the king's table, so to speak, at a banquet, but some are, and therefore that itself. I'm not talking about the ingredients. There's also ingredients problems, but as the fellow on my share came back to me and told me, but the problem is the actual cooking itself. Now, vegan is a good question you asked, Estelle, because vegan isn't cooked, and vegan is strictly none of the problems. So it's a very good question. About vegan. Vegan is not like vegetarian. It's much easier probably to deal with. Yeah. Okay.
Excuse me, I think the battery's about to go on my iPad, so I'm going to have to go and charge it.
Someone in the community was saying that today used to go, if you have to cook your food, then you go to a restaurant, then you go and order the food, you got to speak. Today people can be laying on the couch, you don't have to do anything. All they got to do is press the button. So we're in a situation today where if people's phones run out of battery, they'll starve to death.
I'm sorry. I'm going. Thank you.
Okay. Here we go. No need to worry. Very inspiring message today. Trust in Hashem. Has it changed? You can see in here?
Yeah.
My mother once told me, "You're going into the Rebbe, tell the Rebbe I'm not feeling well." So when I told the Rebbe, he said, let her go to a doctor. She should not be Mershchera. She's always been Mershchera. She should go to a doctor. So then there's a Tzutroi who she trusts, and do what the doctor tells her to do. Then he said, "Sie will wissen, was ich sag." She wants to know what I say. She says, "Ich sag, as was mehr betochen sit haben Ebersten, the more trust she'll have in Hashem, als weniger wird sie davon gehen zu Doktoren. Less and less she'll have to go to doctors."
A jüdische Huis ist sich voll mit Betochen in den Ebersten, was Maschgiach, al kol echad v'yachad, Maschgocha Protis, was gibt Achtung auf jeder eine und eine, in alle Einzelheiten von seinem Leben, in dem doch im Ganzen nicht so kein Ort auf keine Teige, und wir verlassen sich auf den Emerson Balabos von der Welt, und wir tun Tage bederach hat mit der Gashmisdicke Evri, aber hat nicht keine Teige, worin der Eberster 4 Tonnen mit dem, und mit jeder Prat von seinem Leben und seiner Familie hat man dem und Mnuchas Alefisch und Mnuchas Aguf Alemis Ruhigkeit.
אני מתעסק בלימוד ההלכה כל ימיי. ואני מה לא יכול, אני לא אוהב אוכל, אין לי פרנסה. חיברתי ספר בשם מחשבת הטהרה, שמרכז את כל הדינים ששייכים, והכותרת הייתה הלכות טהרה. פרק מסוים תורגם לאנגלית, שלחתי את זה לבנים שלי, שהם ייתנו את זה לרבא בחלוקת $.
Wat de Emerson was dat?
Ja, dat moet naar je workshop.
Ah, workshop?
Dat is de kinderen. Dat is maar vaak als kinderen.
Dat was eigenlijk, dat platen, dat was dat woord van het boek.
הבן שלי ולבו, אומר לרבא, הרבילה בזונדר ברוכה פעמי טאטן, so eine schon kein Deige Sapanosa.
Was sagt er, warum Deige sagt, Deige macht Medizin kann. So haben die mehr betroffen, und Deige zu sein, Psychisté.
פחות דאגות, ויותר ביטחון, אז הקדוש ברוך הוא יעזור. ובאמת הבנים שלי כולם מזכירים לי שחל אז מהפך בכל מצב הפרנסה שלי.
Hat man dem und dem guten Leben forschen, begass mit Aschrecho, Veteilloch, Aschrecho, Beilam, Azeh, Echet, in dem Beilam, Hadedigen Leben. Hat man Echet, a ruhigen Leben, und man kann sich abgeben mit Emesse, jüdische Sachen, und tonnen dem, die Simchof, Tuvli, Wohl, was durch dem alle werden hat Flachen noch geschwebt, beherrlich mehr als Tagräser, die mir kann erwarten, ledig Stadt, was ledig Harabani, was mir wegt in der Ruferei.
My mother had a problem with her heart. They scheduled her for an open heart operation. She wanted to go back to Israel, but the doctor told her, you cannot fly, you're risking your life in this situation. We came to the Rebbe, and my mother told him that she's afraid of the situation. The Rebbe told her to trust רופא כל בשר, to trust Hashem.
צריך לסמוך על הריף וכל בשר ונפעיל לעשות, על השם יזברך. זה תיתן לזדקה כשתיסים לביצור הזכרים. Haschlich al Hashem Yehovcho v'huyach al Kelecho. Was gezeigt der alte Rebbe, ad der Pschas der Bitochen ist wie sie darf zu sein, bis in a Nefen al Haschlich al Hashem Yehovcho. V'huyach al Kelecho, stell der Rebester Eche zu, de Kelim, in welches soll sein und Chal sein und herabkommen die Broche, begoloi betev hanire v'hanigle.
We said if she has a problem with her heart, so the best doctor to go would be Dr. Weiss, the Rebbe's doctor. And Dr. Weiss told my mother, if you will keep this and this diet, I promise you that you will not need to have the operation. It was exactly as he said.
I went through a very difficult time, long depression. It was very painful. It was a long time away from the work. And I remember that when I came once, I was very sick, but I came for Tishri by the Rebbe. I wrote a very, very long letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe gave me some indications as how to go about my healing, how to choose the doctors. It was very personal. But I remember that at that time the Rebbe asked me to study Shara Bitachon from Chovas Alvavos.
Sie darf sein an Midas Habitoche, und das im Seide, am Onesene, Vetera Senu, Kime Wuer in Halache, wenn geht zu der Linie von Bitochenis, meint mir das unpschädliche Pschute, also wird sein gut, Betewe Hanile ve Hanigle. Kime Wuer Baruch in Shar HaBitochen, Necheves Halavovis, und bekam Mekemes, Viko Omo der Digba sei ist, soll sein, Betewe Hanile ve Hanigle.
Nach dem Lesen sein mit Sachen, die Leberste Mittel sein, nach mehr sein, brauche ich, sein gesunde brauche ich, und wenig brauche ich. Wann schnell ist Stevens, mich hat dann die Sache, und was der Wand Sachen in der Leberste. Dann gedenkt ihr das Wegt, ja. Es ist schwer, also ich weiß nicht so. Jetzt haben die Sachen in der Leberste nicht, das ist das Beste Institut.
Leila mal die Joish Odom Atzmei, wie wir sollen nicht beweisen, Milomailo oder Milomatun, Simoni Vechulu, dafür sein Chosek, Bibitcheni Bashem, als kann alle Deit Philosophy und Meister Hatevim, mehaper sein, als wir sein Adra, Bekiise, Noel, Minachesher, noch mehr, wie sie gewähren früher. Und mit über der Digba sei ist, dass sie Davke Betewa Nilva Nigel.
The words that the Rebbe used to answer to my question about my sickness, I used these words by other people I was trying to help, and that helped them very much.
Trust in Hashem.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wish you all a good week.
And you. Thanks.
And see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Oh, and Michelle, was your father's yard side this week?
Yesterday.
Yesterday.
Matzah Shabbos and
Yesterday.
yesterday. Thank you very much.
How many years is it now?
He died in 2008.
Oh, so it's quite a while. All right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, wish you long life.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
And are you going to be available to come in and talk to Phil at the campus about the menorah on August the 19th?
Oh, send me a message and I'll put it in my diary.
Well, I need to double check out on Wednesday and then I'll send you a message.
Okay. It should be okay. I mean, I don't have any plans.
There are a few things we need to go through. Please.
Right. Okay. Tuesday, August. Okay, we'll see then. Okay, let me know.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All the
Thank
best.
you.